Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. So today we're going to be talking through the graduate recruitment funnel. So it's with myself, David Clarkson. I'm the head of marketing at Testgrid, and Stuart Boyd, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks Dave. So for those who don't know me, my name's Stuart. I'm the head of business development at Testgrid. I've been working with HR and recruitment technology at Testgrid here for just over 7 years.
Nice, thanks Stuart. So for those that are unfamiliar with Testgrid, we've been around since 1999. We're a psychometric testing and HR technology company, and ultimately we help organisations make faster and fairer talent acquisition and development decisions. Alrighty, so let's kick off into the agenda today. I'm working on a different computer, so I've got my presentation here and the camera here. I'm going to do my very best to look at the camera as often as I can. So moving on. Okie doke. So for today's webinar, we're going to kick off looking at some market trends. Looking to just touch on some key challenges, and then while we're here is to go through the funnel. We have kind of biased that towards screening, but we are going to talk through each stage of the funnel, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So just as a bit of a housekeeping rule, just feel free to ask any questions in the chat at any time. And what we can do, we can either address those at the time or at the end. So just feel free to throw those in whenever you like. Okay, so kicking off. So ultimately looking at some market trends. So essentially what we're seeing at the moment is that we're very aware that it's essentially a kind of candidate-driven market from a graduate perspective, and that there's a large number of fewer graduates than there has ever been before, with nearly 740,000 graduates to choose from pre-COVID, now being just over 420,000. So down quite a bit in terms of actually the graduates that are available. There's more employers, with a 56% uplift in employers looking to hire graduates on the previous year. And ultimately, this is some data we've got from Google Trends on the right-hand side here that shows a kind of a shift of less searches for graduate programs online. So ultimately, what we're seeing here is a really competitive graduate market. So it's really important to get it right and get your processes in place, offer excellent candidate experience and whatnot. So we'll touch on a few things that will allow us to kind of boost our the attraction stage of the funnel and also screen a lot more effectively. So just kicking off with some key challenges. So the ones I'll look to call out here, and we do have an exhaustive chart in our graduate recruitment guide, which again we've got a link to at the end for anyone who's not seen that. But these are essentially the top challenges based on the EEG employer survey, the most recent EEG employer survey. So we've seen that diversity targets are a real challenge for organisations. Candidate reneging on acceptance or on offers is another challenge. That's something, if anyone who's familiar with our content, we did a webinar about this time last year where that challenge was raised then too. It seems to have increased on last year. As I mentioned, moving down competition for graduates, and some other challenges there. So we're going to address a few of these as we go through the presentation later on. Alrighty, so just touching on essentially the top of the graduate recruitment funnel. Now, I'm going to put it out there first that when we were pulling together this webinar, I was quite keen to go on and start talking about various engagement channels that organisations can be using, various social channels, what to be putting onto social channels, then looking into nurturing candidates. and I wasn't really sure how far to go with that, because we were looking to talk about obviously screening candidates. So I'm just going to put it out there. If anyone in the chat has actually got an interest in myself talking more about essentially using my marketing expertise to talk about how that applies to talent acquisition, if you could please let us know, because I'm quite happy to do more of these presentations and come on and talk about that. So the main things I've got here on the screen is our graduate recruitment funnel. So looking at attraction. So I've essentially just kind of a bit of a snapshot of some of the activity that we should be paying attention to. So using the various job boards, various type of activations, careers, fairs, events, things like that. So we all know that these are part of this stage of the funnel. Also communication, which I'll touch on in the next couple of slides, and the effectiveness of those and how you could be using those. Then the two that I'm looking to call out essentially in this slide are brand and your diversity inclusion channels. So just reiterating the importance of that, as we'll see in the next couple of slides. What we're seeing is, we did the presentation last year, and also our Gen Z guide, and the research we've done all shows that Gen Z and our graduates these days are very social conscious. They're very interested in understanding organisations' D&I policies. It's very important to have an EVP strategy in place. So it's really important to showcase this in your messaging and your content. And I wanted just to provide some key takeaways. So this is kind of an idea of what I mean when I'm talking about more type of marketing kind of content. I'd love to come on and talk about what channels to use, how to use them. And yeah, because it's pretty easy for me to do so. Yeah, so for your D&I, yes, get your messaging right, which we can look at in a second. But I just wanted to throw out some potential channels to utilise to actually find diverse candidates. So I've got some examples there for Indigenous candidates, neurodiverse candidates, Exceptional being one of our partners. So that will allow you to kind of fill that part of the funnel. And also we've got assessments that allow you to assess these candidates, which we can talk about later on. So moving on from that, just having a look at some channels, just touching on this very briefly. Ultimately, the AAG employer survey showed that the most effective channels are your owned channels. So owned vs earned, owned being your own website, your own social media, and earned being anything you pay for, essentially, so your advertising, etc. So essentially your own website being the most is the most effective tool for recruiting graduates, own literature, etc. But you also have to get them there. So just looking at some over on the right hand side here, some tools that are some social channels that are effective. So LinkedIn ultimately being down as being the most effective, Facebook coming in there. So Facebook and LinkedIn being the most effective, but ultimately what we see there is LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, it's all similar type of content, maybe with the exception of Instagram. It's all similar content in terms of format. Whereas I want to touch on TikTok as an emerging social platform, although it's not been seen as it doesn't seem to be used as much as an emerging platform. So just want to touch on that briefly. What we're seeing on TikTok at the moment is that it's kind of essentially trying to find its feet as a tool. We have seen some examples of organisation using TikTok effectively. For example, Chipotle in the States are using it, not necessarily for graduates. It's not really seems to find its feet in the kind of in the same way that we have with other social channels. For example, one of the major benefits of LinkedIn is it actually has a job search function, which I'm pretty sure is one of the reasons that that's so high. But ultimately, TikTok, I just wanted to touch on that one and focus on that one, because it's kind of an untapped resource. There's still ground to be broken with that technology and that platform. So I just wanted to throw it out there, just some tips or some some research you can do. Just have a look at, take a note of these hashtags, particularly TikTok resumes, and there's even one for Australia now. That's a piece of pilot functionality that's been put out there. If you go on that, you'll see a lot of candidates, Australian candidates, New Zealand candidates, as well as other internationals, kind of putting themselves out there, actually creating a kind of CV and running through their skills on TikTok. And then also some organisations have started putting out there in terms of the benefits of working with the organisation. And other things you can do is, like, you can actually reshare employees' TikToks and things. But really the kind of key thing there is to be authentic, to really kind of showcase the kind of human element of your organisation, which really kind of differentiates it from all the other social platforms. So moving on from that, just talking about your content essentially. So I mentioned earlier on about your CSR and your D&I, and have your value prop, your EVP very prominent on your website, and just looking to reiterate why that is important. So what I've got here is data from Prospel. Is basically shows on the left hand side here is the page views, what pages are graduates looking at. So this is graduate and graduates in New Zealand and Australia. Dark blue is male and light blue is female. I just noticed there's not a legend on the chart. But ultimately what we're seeing here is reviews, graduate stories, day in the life type content is essentially the most viewed content by graduates. But then we look over on the right hand side here, we actually see, if we look at the time on page, so the amount of time a graduate is dwelling on the page, we see that the diversity content is getting essentially the highest dwell time. So low in the left hand side there, just that it's diversity content in terms of page views is kind of just getting just nearly round about the 5% mark. It's really important in your reviews, graduate stories, day in the life type content to really reiterate your EVP within that, and all the initiatives you've got going on, and your and showcase your diversity within your organisation. And just lastly on this, from a messaging perspective, before we move on to Stuart, just wanted to kind of showcase some organisations that are doing diversity well. So from just a kind of video and content perspective, we've got Toll, New South Wales government really having some great content on their website, really going into kind of depth of what it's like to be a graduate within these organisations. And then Headspace showcasing their Indigenous graduates and Indigenous candidates. So it's quite a good one to look out, to head over and have a look at their website. They're doing some great work at really showcasing the people within their organisation. And also Queensland government with a recent initiative that they had for women in renewables. So just really important just to have this type of content at the forefront of your messaging. So the next part of our presentation, we're now going to move on. I'm going to have a look at applications and setting your criteria and screening. So I'll hand you over to Stuart now.
Great, thanks, Dave. So if we move through to the next slide, what we thought would be the best way to really showcase, I guess, how you can construct a really thorough, highly valid, automated recruitment funnel, utilizing technology, would be to actually walk you through the funnel that we're planning on using for our graduate psychologist that we'll be looking to recruit early in the new year. Applications opening soon, if anyone's interested, but to give you a little heads up, this is what we'll be looking for. Dave?
Yeah, sorry.
It worked so well in the rehearsal, didn't it?
Yeah, of course, yes.
So look, obviously all the really basic stuff, do they have a degree? Is it relevant to what, to be a psychologist here at Testgrid? Work rights, geographic location, we do work remotely, we've got lots of flexibility, but we ultimately do need them to be within certain locations. And obviously we've got pretty stringent security requirements as well. So they need to be able to get a police check and all those kinds of things. That's kind of the basic stuff, but the real juicy stuff that we're after, numerical ability. There are psychologists, we do lots of data analytics, as we'll touch on soon. Problem solving, we've got to be able to work with our clients and help them solve, their graduate recruitment problems. Emotional intelligence is really key. And then most importantly for us, you can see we've got the 5 Testgrid values there. So obviously the Testgrid values at Testgrid, sort of resonate through everything that we do. And that's the biggest, I guess, thing that we're looking for, is the people that will fit in with our organization, people that will add to our organization and live our values. So I guess that's the challenge that we're looking to solve in terms of trying to find ourselves a graduate psychologist to start with us next year. So I guess the question is, that's all well and good, but how are we gonna find this person? Dave, bang. So we're gonna run a pretty simple sort of 5-stage assessment process. We're gonna run an online application form, and we're gonna tick off all our basic requirements there. We're gonna do some screening assessments, covering off our numerical, problem solving, and our emotional intelligence. We'll move on to our video interviewing, where we're going to do some numerical testing, which again might sound really strange for a video interview, but we'll get to that in a second. And we're going to have our first pass at their values alignment with Testgrid. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move into a second stage, what we like to call detailed assessments, where we'll be validating that values alignment. And then finally, we'll have a face-to-face interview. And by the time we get to the face-to-face interview, if we've gone through all these stages correctly, we should be really confident that hopefully all the candidates coming through to face-to-face interview would be, of really high quality. And ideally, we'd be happy to offer any of them. It will just be those final fine-tuning at that stage. As you can see here, everything outside of the basic requirements, we're checking at multiple stages of the recruitment process as well. And that's really key to make sure that we're running a highly valid assessment process. Dave, probably the last thing to point out here is that the first half of our funnel is going to be fully automated. So from application form, so when the candidates first come into the top of our funnel, through to when they've completed their section of the video interview, there'll be no manual intervention from ourselves. That'll all be automated through the process. So again, as Dave touched on, it's a tough market. We want to move people through really quickly. We don't want to dilly-dally. And as well, we obviously want to minimize the amount of intervention, the amount of manual processing that we need. So we're probably expecting about 100 applicants for this role. Obviously, compared to some of the numbers that the people on this webinar will be dealing with, that's a pretty small number. So, people have thousands or even tens of thousands at times. So that automation can become really key. Okay, Dave. So first up, a couple of really key things to consider when designing your application form. Obviously, as most of you know, application form taken via your ATS. It's really important to design the application form for automatic progression. What are the key things that you need to consider or you need to collect? That basic information. How can you collect it in a way that it is automatically scored? Having the candidates complete their drop-down boxes, selection boxes, radio boxes, etc., so as that it can be automatically scored and you can move them through as soon as you see that they meet the key criteria. Really important at this stage as well to collect your diversity, equality, and inclusion information. So as we get through the process, we'll touch on at each of the stages. But if you've got candidates that you might want to make reasonable adjustments to, they might have vision impairments, they might be neurodiverse, they might be from an Indigenous background, they might have English as a second language. They are all things that we want to be adjusting as we go through the recruitment process. But obviously that information needs to be collected in an effective manner. And the sooner that we can bring that information into the decision-making process, obviously the better. Dave? Oh, there we go. And there's a selection of the different applicant tracking systems or HRIS systems that you can obviously use to use your application form. shameless plug, Testgrid integrate obviously with all of these. Dave. So moving through, we've got our candidates, and let's assume we had 100 candidates apply, and about 15% of them were screened out in that application form. So they might not have had appropriate degrees, work rights, etc. So we're down to 85 now. What are we looking to assess? Obviously for us, it is the numerical reasoning that we spoke about. It's the problem solving, and of course, it's the emotional intelligence. So what are the considerations when we're designing our testing strategy for this stage? Obviously, we need to assess those elements that we're looking for. Of course, we need to look at the candidate experience as well. We want to keep it short and sharp, make it easy for the candidates to complete, ideally mobile enabled, and we want it to be as engaging as possible. The challenge, of course, is that we want to keep it engaging and fun, but also we need to keep the validity and the integrity of the assessments as well. And that's so that we know that we can trust the results and the results are reliable, but also from a DEI point of view as well, we need to make sure that we are picking assessments that aren't going to discriminate against any of those cohorts, or if they are, that there's suitable interventions that can be put in place or adjustments that can be put in place to make sure that those people move through the process. Other key thing, obviously, to consider is that we want to be able to have automatic progression at this stage. So we need to select assessments that are going to give us a single score back, so as that we can effectively stack rank our candidates. So, Dave, what we have done, we've gone backwards instead of forwards.
There we go.
Again, it went so well in the practice. So look, we're going to go here with a Saville cognitive ability assessment, nice short, sharp assessment, Australian graduate norm groups, ESL norm groups, mobile enabled, and we're going to combine that with our GNOS emotional intelligence assessment. Again, nice and short, single score returned. It's an Australian tool, and again, something we've got lots of flexibility around, time limits and what have you. And as Dave touched on before, we've actually got a new tool that we can use at this stage coming onto the platform, which is the exceptional tool, which is specifically designed for neurodiverse candidates. So again, if we do have people that are neurodiverse, we can direct them into that funnel and make sure they're being assessed appropriately and given the chance to put their best foot forward. Ideally, out of this stage, we've got 85 candidates going in. We'd hope to cut down over half here. So we'd like to ultimately come to bring 40 through to the next stage, which of course is the video interviewing. Now, again, at video interviewing, what did I say we were looking to assess? We want to assess the numerical ability, and we also want to assess or make an initial assessment on their alignment to the Testgrid values. So key considerations, obviously candidate experience. Again, we want to keep it nice and short, keep it mobile enabled. Hopefully they've been able to move through automatically, so it's a nice and quick and seamless process for them. Obviously being an ATS integration as well, that'll be nice and seamless. And the other thing that I really love when my clients do when doing their video interview is really make it as personal as possible. Record your own welcome videos, make them awkward, like Dave's and I's probably look right now, so the candidates are nice and relaxed. Thank them for the time, try and make them feel comfortable, try and make it a bit more personal. Again, like Dave was saying, some of the attraction piece as well. My next suggestion, but just get creative with the questions. What we're going to do here, we're going to ask a total of 5 questions. 4 of them are going to be video response questions based on the values. And our psychologists will obviously help us put those together. And the other one we're going to do is we're actually going to do a text response question. So we're going to give the candidates a numerical style problem that they could actually expect to face if they were a graduate at Testgrid, and they can actually work through that themselves. So it's very, very contextualized and super relevant to the role that they'll be doing, gives them an idea as to what they can expect on the job, and obviously gives us a great way to assess, do they have the sort of the numerical skills, numerical thought process that we're going to require. But I think just make the questions fun and keep the answers relatively short. Again, DE&I, there's lots of strategies that we can bring in here for candidates that require adjustments. We can extend the time limits, voice-only videos. We can give the candidates the opportunity to re-record their answers as well. if appropriate. And I think if we can, like I said, we said at application form stage, if we collect the data, correctly and accurately at that stage, we can make those adjustments as we get further down the funnel. And the last one, and this is probably one that you can all hopefully relate to, is think of the raters when you're designing the video interview structure. Keep the answers short, especially we see in the graduate market. Graduates will fill the space. If you give them 2 minutes, they will answer for 2 minutes. If you give them a minute, they'll say the same amount of stuff, but they'll just do it in a minute. So that's really key. And the other is to have a think about the order of the questions. If you've got a question that is a non-negotiable, so it might be a question about safety if you're in a safety critical environment, or it might be a very technical question that they need to answer, I'd put that first. And that way, when your raters go through, if their answers aren't acceptable at that point, they can move through the rest of the questions more quickly. So what we're looking to do here is, again, eliminate about half of our candidates. So we'll be going from 40 down to about 20 at this stage. And obviously now, when we're reviewing these videos, this is the first time that we've actually stopped to look at them or stopped to do any kind of manual intervention with them. Dave? Okay, now getting to the pointy end. So we've got 20 candidates left. So we're starting to look at the detailed assessments. So you remember what we're looking to assess at this stage for us is their alignment to the test grid values. And obviously this is probably the most important stage, because by this stage, again, we've got all of the candidates will all be pretty strong. And we're really getting into the meaty stuff now. So what we want to consider in selecting the assessments is how we're going to measure them against the test grid values. And most important for us is, how do we have a really strong assessment so that we know that when we're looking at the results, they're as accurate as they can be. Obviously, there's a lot of assessments on the market, but for Testgrid, when we're assessing, we want something that's really high validity. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some bespoke reporting set up within our platform. We can actually take the candidates' results and put them directly against our 5 Testgrid values on a score out of 10. And we can really hone in then on who is aligned to the values. We can look at an overall score, but ultimately we're not looking at automatic progression here. We want to look at the spread of the scores as well. Again, really important to consider the candidate experience. It is a more detailed tool, but we still don't want it to be too long. Half an hour of assessment at this stage, is more than suitable. Certainly once you're getting over about an hour, it's becoming too long. And then again, there's a number of strategies that can be brought in around the DE&I for candidates that need adjustments to be made. So for this one, we're going to be pretty direct in what we're picking. We're going to go with the Saville Wave, which really represents sort of the most valid and reliable assessment available on the market. It's only half an hour. It can be done on mobile, so it's a strong candidate experience, but it's a really strong and valid tool. And that's the thing that we're most interested in, that when we get the results, that we're confident that the results are absolutely as accurate as possible. Okay, Dave? So we've made it through the face-to-face interview. Ideally, what we're going to be looking to do is bring our final 10 candidates through to a face-to-face and eliminate them down to ultimately just one. By this stage, we're pretty confident that we've got 10 good candidates who would all be suitable. And for us, it's really just filtering out those last couple of decisions as to who we would like to go with. At this stage, we want to do some validation of the data that we've collected previously. With obviously our detailed tool, so our Saville Wave, but also our EI tool that we used at screening, we are able to pull some results, and we can use some of those results to probe and ask questions of the candidates if there were any areas that we felt they were a little, any little concerns. We can iron them out at this stage. And ultimately as well, it's very much a two-way style meeting or style interview for us. So again, we want to give the candidates lots of chances to ask questions of us, make sure that they're feeling really comfortable as well if they were to be coming into the role. And then ultimately from here, we want to be able to take our final candidate through to probity, police check, and then start onboarding.
Thanks for that, Stuart. So yeah, that's brilliant, mate. So essentially, it's kind of taken through to 10% of the original number that applied for the role, using multiple points there, and what was interesting about the multiple points where you use assessments was very interesting for me as well, the different times. So just moving on to have a little look at hiring. So just looking at some data just in terms of what other organisations are doing it, are up to at the moment. I'm pretty sure this is the first webinar that I've managed to last half an hour without mentioning COVID or our pandemic, lockdowns, etc. went through. But as a result of that, working from home obviously been a massive thing that people are looking for now. So 75% of organisations now offering that at the hiring stage, 66% using offering flexible hours. So out with that, we can see that the average starting salary is 68,000, and then other things as well. It's very important, again, in the communication stage, not just the hiring stage, talking about the development. That's something that is crucial for Gen Z and graduates, is that they want to see that what is development within an organisation. So yeah, have as well as all the D&I content, etc. Have all the career progression stories, etc. You can have that at the attraction stage, but certainly that has been made very evident at the hiring stage when the offer has been made, with some organisations like even offering like buddy systems and things like that for development. Just touching on quickly on nurturing. So what we see here is that a large organisation, number of organisations are nurturing candidates essentially directly, either via phone or with email, so EDMs and things like that. So that could be once you've made the offer and you want to essentially keep the candidate warm, and make sure they're engaged, keeping an eye on those reneging figures, keep them engaged with content, what we spoke about before, what it's like to work in the organisation, the D&I content, etc. We see that a lot of organisations are inviting them, graduates, along to social events. There's also some organisations are essentially starting graduates a lot earlier. But yeah, so what we've got here is some of the other methods that organisations are using to nurture candidates. So I'll just hand you back to Stuart, who's going to talk about utilising your assessment data.
Thanks, Dave. So look, obviously using the assessment data through the recruitment process is obviously the primary function. We see so often though that people will collect all this data through their recruitment. They'll start their candidate and potentially never look at that data again. If you look at the assessments that we use through our recruitment pipeline, they can all be used, or not all of them, but particularly the behavioural and the emotional intelligence ones can be used for onboarding. They have a range of onboarding reports, like the one you can see here on the left, giving the candidate, or the graduate now, because they've been hired, information about their core strengths, core development areas, tips for the individual, tips for their manager, and also then we can pull a great range of team reports as well. So if you do have a larger cohort of graduates and you wanted to do onboarding or further development as a group and look at the profile of that group, again, all that information is sitting in the system. It just needs to be accessed. So very much, whether you are using Testgrid or if you're using assessments through a different provider, that is something I'd really strongly urge everyone to consider, is how can you keep that data? It's so valuable. You've gone to the effort of collecting it. How do you keep utilising it through the graduate life cycle, not just the recruitment process? Dave? And then look, the last thing as well I'd encourage you to do with your data that you've collected through the recruitment process is look to continuously improve your process year on year, or intake on intake for those doing multiple intakes. Obviously looking through the process here, you collect your data through the recruitment process. The next stage obviously is you hire. So you can see often we see trends that people who make it through the assessment centres or make it at the bottom of the funnel, there's actually have commonality at the top of the funnel. So it might be that all of your candidates that are making it through the assessment centres all have particularly high emotional intelligence, and you actually can see that at your screening stage. So therefore you can be, more confident in your cutoffs, in your benchmarks, put greater emphasis on those results earlier in the funnel. Obviously, over time, you can match that against your performance data as well, how your graduates perform once they're within the organisation, year 1, year 2, onwards. So all that data, you can do your analytics, and we do it for a lot of our clients, and we use it to initially build, but then develop and refine the benchmarks and the cutoffs that they use in their recruitment processes. So again, you can screen out more people earlier if there are clear trends. You can know with even greater certainty that the people you're bringing through to your face-to-face interviews or to your assessment centres are going to be suitable candidates, and therefore you don't need to invite as many people. All of these things can be developed again by just using the data that you've got, and obviously, certainly within Testgrid, we've got a great team of psychologists, obviously with high numerical and problem-solving skills, as per the previous recruitment process, and we can utilise those to help you, drive continuous improvement throughout your recruitment. Thanks, Dave.
Great. All righty. Thanks very much for that, Stuart. Okay, so just move on to our questions stage. So we've got a couple there. Okay, so I've got three actually. Okay, I've got 3 questions here. I'll list the questions first, Stuart, and then we can just kind of go through them. So our first one is, how do you know what is the best approach regarding D&I? Our second one is, how do you determine your cutoffs? Then there's another one about, what about technical assessments, from Kelly. And then we've just got another one there that says, how do you know how valid the assessments are? So
okay, maybe we'll start. Maybe we'll start with the D&I question regarding the best approach to D&I. So look, the biggest thing that we see in dealing with candidates that have, requirements for adjustment, suitable adjustment, is it really needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. It's not as simple as saying, right, I've got a candidate with vision impairment. Okay, great, screen reader is the way to go. It needs to be done on a horses for courses basis. And a lot of the work that our team of psychologists here do is working with our clients and working with the individual candidates to make sure that the adjustments being made are appropriate for them. So that's really key. So if, again, whether using Testgrid or not, if you do have candidates that are identified as needing adjustments, best thing to do is to reach out and work through it on an individual basis. In terms of determining the cutoffs that are used, so obviously we have a recommended set of cutoffs that most of our clients will use the first time they run their programs. Obviously, as we just touched on before, over time, as that data is built, we find a lot of our clients will build their own custom cutoffs based on their own requirements. And then with regards to technical assessments, so obviously we didn't use any technical assessments through our example process, but certainly more and more people are using technical assessments. They can be used either at the screening stage of the process or at the second, more detailed phase. I'm assuming the question might be relating to programming skills. Certainly that is something that we can help our clients to test for, and we do quite actively. And again, having that, they produce a single score, so obviously they're great for volume recruitment. And then the fourth question, around how valid the assessments are. So that's a really interesting question. In our example process, we've obviously gone for highly valid tools. And if you look at the nature of the Testgrid business and what we do, of course, that makes a lot of sense. It is really important, though, to understand the validity of the tools that you're using. Obviously, for us, the validity is the most important thing because we want the results to be as accurate as possible. All particularly behavioural tests should have a validity score that they can provide, and that'll ultimately let you know where they sit on that validity ranking. And again, look, we'd be really happy to have a chat with anyone if they want to know the validity of the tools they're using and potentially look at more valid options. We'd obviously be really happy to go through that data with them.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Stuart. So any other questions before we finish up for today? Let's give it 5 seconds. All righty. Okay, doke. So thank you very much for joining today, everyone. One more thing. If you haven't already, we now have our graduate recruitment guide. So it talks about what we spoke about today. It goes into a lot more detail, a lot more data, a lot more of a breakdown of the data that we share throughout the presentation that was just dropped in. So that is available on our website to download. So if you head over there, if you've not downloaded it yet. And yep, that's all from us today. And so thanks very much, Stuart, and for your input. That was really great. And thanks very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.